Everybody, welcome to the Leadership Lab. Good morning to the millions online as well. Thank you so much for being here. I've got a fantastic session today, a little bit of a break from the norm in terms of format, really innovative format, cooked up here by Howard Schimmel and David Cole. So we've talked so far in our Leadership Lab sessions around the opportunity of cross-platform measurement. We know the cross-platform reach rewards. Average 5-platform campaign is 35% more effective than the average single-platform campaign. And throughout our Leadership Lab series, this session this summer, we've been talking about how to capitalize on that opportunity, how to measure. So we've been focusing predominantly on measurement challenges. We're going to pivot today and talk about existential challenges to a certain extent. Just to kind of bring that into perspective a little bit, when I joined the ARF at the beginning of 2014, big hot issue in the industry was viewability. And just before the MRC came out with their viewability of their standards for viewable impressions on display and on video in the summer of 2014. And then out of nowhere, it fell. At the end of 2014, there was a report that came out quite scaling the issue of ad fraud. So suddenly said, okay, there's $6 billion disappearing over here, right? And that changed, I think, in fact, last year. And then to add on to that, last year we started hearing a lot more talk around ad blocking. In fact, the $20+ billion that are potentially being wasted through ad blocking. So you've got these three big issues, right, in digital, which is viewability, and ad blocking, and ad fraud too. So it's easy to conceive of that as just applying to digital. However, as we saw a couple of weeks ago in the session here with Dave, Ray, and Rada, traditional media are also being transformed in many ways. And they talked us through some of the strategies and tactics they're using to transform and keep traditional media as relevant as it ever has been. Now, that if you put those two pieces of those two data streams together, you're left with the potential situation, which has been outlined by our two professors today, that traditional media have to face the challenges that only digital is facing right now. So David and Howard have a really fascinating story to tell in terms of what that might look like, kind of apocalyptic vision, or certainly a challenging vision of what media will look like in 2019. So let me hand over now to our two professors for today. Professor Howard Schimmel, who's the Chief Research Officer of Turner Broadcasting, and Professor David Cole, who's the CEO of Morgan Digital Ventures. Welcome, Howard and David. Thank you.
I love this professor. I'm going to have to really wear that for a little while. So we're going to talk to you about a situation. Actually, I want to hand these out. For those of you on the phone, I think we got about 15 on the phone. You should have received yesterday morning by email the situation and exercise for today. We're going to do a little exercise together, which should be fun. And if you haven't, email Chris Bacon right now if you're on the phone, and he will make sure to send you the document that went out yesterday morning. So here's how we're going to play out today. We're going to talk about let's say, some of the trends that we're seeing today in the movement towards universally cross-platform media consumption. And we're going to challenge ourselves to think about a world in 3 years from now where some of the ills that we're beginning to see become bigger and bigger economically have now touched not just digital media, which is kind of pennies relative to all of media, but actually have gone across all media channels. Okay, so if you have in front of you our little cheat sheet, our situation that we're gonna talk about is 3 years from today. It's August 18th, 2019, and we have seen content and advertising. The business is truly a cross-platform business. There's no such thing as digital anymore. Nobody's saying it's digital, mobile, or TV, or print, or at home. It's just media. Video consumption, in particular, not only has gone across platforms, but it is also being delivered entirely on demand, with the exception of sports, because we haven't figured out how to make sports on demand. But also interesting is that the media buying and selling that today has gone probably 30, 40% programmatic and digital. There's still a lot of deal making. Well, it's 100%. We're just in a world where media buying and selling is all being planned programmatically and traded programmatically. So those two dynamics that today, in 2016, were very much a digital phenomenon, are a cross-platform phenomenon. But here's the rub. One of the problems is that two phenomenons that are very exclusive to digital today have now gone cross-platform, and they are bot fraud and consumer adoption of ad blocking. I'm going to ask a show of hands in the room, and then on the phone, I'm just going to ask for a quick pulse. How many of you have an ad blocker on either a PC, a mobile device, or both? And this is like Vegas. What you say in this room stays here. Nobody's taking. Okay, so it's about half in the room. And just from a quick yay on the phone, how many folks on the phone have an ad blocker on one of their devices, at least one of their devices? Is the phone in a place where we can hear?
Everyone's muted.
Oh, everyone's muted. Okay, let's not kill ourselves. It was curiosity. So about half of the folks in the room said they're using an ad blocker, and I'll admit I actually downloaded a new one last night. I saw an article on this thing called Our Data. Not promoting it. I'm just pointing out that I saw it and I thought it was cool. So that behavior is tipped, and it's extended to what we think of today as television. Well, it's that screen. And this notion of bot fraud, again, by quick show of hands, how many of you are aware and familiar with what's going on with bot fraud and digital advertising? Okay, so that's just a little bit more of a minority, and therefore I'll explain it. What's happening with bots in digital in 2016 are that these fraudulent pieces of technology, we call them robots, have been created unfortunately by criminals, mostly not in this country, but around the world, and they crawl around the web behaving like human beings. And when you behave like a human being on the web, you get served advertising. And so you have a legitimate advertiser, like Colgate-Palmolive, paying to have their ads displayed, except they're displayed not to a human, they're displayed to a bot. And there are two types of entities that benefit from that. One is, if you've ever heard the term, I buy traffic. Well, if you're a website that buys traffic, chances are you're buying non-human traffic, because it pumps up your numbers and it allows you to make more money, but there's actually not people behind it. And the other way in which these bots make money is the criminals themselves run fake websites, and they sell advertising programmatically, and the bots visit the fake website and a real ad gets served. And so Colgate-Palmolive pays a criminal. And while these things get discovered over time, it's a $30 million to $40 million a day, not a week, not a month, not a year. It's a $30 to $40 million a day problem in digital today. Estimated to be between $6 and $7 billion of money exiting the ecosystem. Imagine if consumer adoption for ad blockers grows, and I didn't put a stat in here, but let's just say it's ubiquitous, and ad blocking, which was previously in 2016 a digital problem, now is a cross-platform problem, not a $6 billion out of $50 billion problem in this country, but it's close to $45 billion of impact relative to the total media ecosystem. And so scenario number one is, this is what's happened 3 years from now, and we're going to ask you to figure out how to solve, how to change, how to deal with this crisis. I'm going to take a pause for a second and introduce Professor Schimmel. And he's going to talk about 3 years from now what's happening in media buying and planning and what your second situation is. And for those of you on the phone, why don't we do in the room here, we'll do the bots and the ad blockers. And on the phone, you guys, led by Chris Bacon, who's going to be the kind of phone leader, are going to work through Professor Schimmel's exercise. And then we'll talk about how we're going to go execute. Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So just maybe to start and give this the right context, think about the world of research as it affects the way digital advertising is bought, planned, and sold, versus the way that TV inventory is planned, bought, and sold, right? in a TV world, we care about things like Nielsen or ComScore, RenTrack. We care about being very precise around forecasting how much audience is going to be in front of the set when an advertiser's commercial airs in one of our programs. And then we care about the measurement on the back end, because then we have to not only plan and estimate effectively, but then on the back end, we need to actually rectify with a client, did we deliver the impression we guaranteed in the deal? Right? That's a TV world we live in today. Obviously, in the digital world, the role of research from companies like ComScore is dramatically different, right? We use ComScore to profile our websites, show the demographics, but as it relates to the actual buying and selling, it really doesn't affect things, with the exception of things like OCR and VC, which is not the majority of the digital business now, right? So just think about this, because it's an important framework as we think about 3 years out. Also think about the fact that right now, because of, especially in a cable world, we're really dealing with a world of dumb pipes, right? We have one distribution path for CNN live TV, right? We have one signal that goes up to satellite and is distributed to a couple of thousand cable head ends throughout the country. They just basically just take our signal, relay it out to, the 80 million homes that receive CNN today. So, if you think about that versus a digital world where everything is served directly to consumers or PCs or cookies, very different world. 3 years from now, all of television is digitized, right? We're delivering our content. Either the cable operators have refit their plumbing so that they could do addressable to the home advertising, or we are, as an industry, we're doing a lot more. One of the beauties of things like over the top. I don't know. Does anybody in this room ever watch ESPN via the Watch ESPN app? Excellent. So that's an over-the-top app, right? So ESPN, when you're watching ESPN, they have the same digital ad serving technology as when you're using the ESPN you're watching ESPN on a phone. So imagine a world where that is now the norm, and the majority of viewing of traditional TV content is done in an over-the-top world, data, addressable individuals. So what we want you to do in the second challenge is really stop and say, in a world where TV is transacted much more like digital is today, what is the role of research? And if you were Nielsen, leading strategic planning at Nielsen or ComScore, what do you set up the measurement system to actually do on behalf of the advertiser and the media company? Because at that point, we don't care about estimating audience, right? We could just serve as many ads until we get to the guarantee for the advertiser. So the whole idea of using data to plan and forecast, and then we don't need measurement, because we actually know from ads, hopefully people are not using ad blockers on their big screen TVs. But the challenge is really to think about, what is the role of measurement there? And how do research companies actually stay relevant to the industry in a world where now everything cross-platform is done very much in a digitized way?
So here's how we're going to play this out. Folks in the room, we could turn around some tables. We're going to spend about 20 minutes and ask you to, you're about to get invited. Let me actually set the situation. You're about to get invited to the Media Industry Ad Crisis Summit, which is dealing with these two scenarios. And you as a team, you're actually the future rock stars at Morgan Digital Ventures, because we are going to make a crazy amount of money if we could solve this problem. And we're going to spend about 20 minutes trying to figure out how to solve it, and then we're going to come back together, and the two professors are going to listen to the answers, because we are the industry luminaries. So in the group in the room here, We're going to deal with ad blocking and fraud that has become ubiquitous across channels, including television. And for the group on the phone, everyone's going to unmute. We're going to lower the volume in our room here. And Chris Bacon's going to kind of be a little bit of our leader on the phone. We're going to ask you guys to spend about 20 minutes collaborating on the media measurement and research challenge that completely gets turned on its side when every single transaction is measured ubiquitously by the companies that deliver the transaction. We'll come back in about 20 minutes, and then we're going to ask each of the groups to present their response. And on the bottom of page 2 talks about the things we'd like you to consider, right? What is your solution to the problem, and why do you believe it solves for the challenge you've been presented? What business dynamics must change? What has to be different in the world of media for your solution to work? Who has to activate it? Who else has to get on board? How do we make that change happen? If there's technology in your solution, which there may or may not be, tell us a little bit about that, and how does the technology itself deal with the issue? And here's the thing. How does your technology work so it can't be gamed? So much technology is just a cat and mouse race, or a, is that right? Yeah, cat and mouse. I hate those things, those little, I never remember what they actually are. I end up making them up. So it's a cat and mouse race, and we end up playing whack-a-mole with technology. As soon as something comes in, another thing bangs it down. How is yours going to work if it's a technology solution? How does the consumer affect it? Let's not just think B2B here, but let's think about the consumer. History shows that in media, the consumer always ultimately wins. And finally, if there are winners and losers in business, who are those winners and losers? And why will they accept, if they're going to be a loser, the change? Okay?
We should probably take questions before we.
Yeah, I was going to say, there are questions from the room, and then while we're talking, folks on the phone, you can unmute your lines. We'll take a couple of questions from the phone, and then we'll get into it. Any questions from the room? We were that good that you're like, yeah, I totally understand what we're doing. Wow, stunning. That's why I'm a professor.
There you go.
On the phone, questions on the exercise? Okay, so we're going to lower the volume of the phone in this room, but I'm going to ask everyone on the phone to begin the discussion. And Chris, just can you confirm that you're off mute and that you can speak?
I'm off mute and I can speak.
Great. Chris, will you take the leadership role with the phone group in tackling problem number 2 at the top of page 2? We'll reconvene in about 20 minutes. All right, guys, let's get to it. And who knows how to take the volume down? So they don't hear us. We can mute us.
Hey, Chris, can anyone, I'm on the phone, this is Denise.
Yeah, hi Denise.
I'm just wondering if we all can hear each other. I could hear you, Chris.
Excellent. Okay. How about everybody else?
Well, if it's me and you, I'm game.
Everybody else, do me a favor. If you go to your browser, you'll see a little microphone on the lower right-hand corner. Make sure that it says audio on. Everybody got that? If you're having problems, still type in a question on the chat box. So Denise, are you still there?
I'm certainly here. Wow, I mean, this is quite a problem. Um, so it's almost like where to begin. So thinking about the solution and what to do, I have a couple of thoughts and comments. And please, folks, everyone else on the phone, you're probably feeling equally overwhelmed by this exercise. And let's just, we'll work through the pain. But it's an eye opener and thought provoking. So I think this is really a fantastic way to get some of these ideas we've been learning to gel. So here are my thoughts. I come from the measurement world. I'm with ComScore,
Yep.
but I'm not on the digital side. I'm the old legacy Rentrack side. Before that, Kantar. So I've been also in the TAM world as well, TV audience measurement, but not Nielsen. So my thoughts are with addressable advertising, for example, which I was very much involved with for many years. There still needs to be objectivity in that when the addressable ads are served, the only entity that knows what's been served is the operator, and I'm talking about on the TV side.
Yeah.
And so, for billing purposes, there's the whole audience process now, audience measurement that contributes to planning. So that is, of course, with addressable, not an issue really, because it's who's on and who's available and their demographics at that moment. But when it comes to actually saying this really occurred and at a real human, and this gets kind of to problem number one, was observing or was there for the ad, that takes some objectivity. So I see measurement taking place, objectively, but with a different focus. Thoughts about that from anybody? Is maybe my point clear that it's still the measurement, but after the fact of who have seen for billing rather than upfront for planning? Chris, your thoughts?
I'm here. So any reactions, folks? If you've got, okay, Elise. Hey, again, make sure that your audio button says on in the right hand side of the screen. And if you can't, and if it won't come back on, feel free to type your thoughts into the chat box. We're going to be monitoring both. Here's a thought. I mean, I think, Denise, it's really interesting when you talk about the after the fact, which is very much the way digital is working now, is the measurement is taking place once somebody has been served as opposed to in advance. I guess what does that mean then? I mean, in your experience, what are the implications then for the measurement tools that you've worked with? What has to change? What would have to change at ComScore in order to be able to measure the TV that's been served after the fact instead of beforehand?
Actually, not all that much. Because it's still a matter of gathering the available data of who's in the audience and overlaying that with the dynamic ad insertion data in order to and to apply the logic to filter out the problems that are being addressed by problem number one, so that you're really counting human beings and sets of eyeballs. But really, I think it's more important is what the metrics need to be. So the underlying data is our devices are getting better at collecting data that can be more readily used to calculate the measurements that are needed. But what are those measurements that are needed? Is reach still going to be an issue? Impressions without any consideration of time. How many impressions did my ad receive? So I think it's more of, and where do we need? What do folks need in order for that billing to take place?
Really good questions. So I'm going to turn it over, see if there's everybody else on the phone, if you've got thoughts on that. So let's talk about that, then the metrics. If we think that technology already exists through...
It's continuing to evolve. So the technology is continuing to evolve, and that's going to just continue to happen.
Yeah. So all right, so the technology will evolve. It will allow us, if we presume, for example, that the technology available now in set-top boxes and cookies is now available in the home, on the smart TV, so that you've got exactly what has been served to the home as opposed to what is proposed to be served to the home. So the technology will work. How then are the metrics? Denise, you raised a really good point. I guess one of the questions: is there any reason the metrics should or ought to change as we move to measuring those individuals on TV? Is there something different we need to be considering? I'm curious for the folks like from Cox. That would change this would change your delivery business, the cable services quite a bit. What do you think? What do you think would change about how you're doing business and how you're measuring your audiences now in this kind of a world? No thoughts, anybody? Oh, who's that?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Yes.
Hi, Leslie.
No. Hi there. I'm sorry. I think I'll try and speak for people who are dialing in through the Blue Jeans app. Our microphone is disabled and we can't get through. So
Okay, hang on.
I'm sorry. It sounded like we were so quiet. I had to run to find a laptop to get online in a hotel room so that I could try and speak to you all.
Appreciate that.
So to try and give 2 cents, I think I do wish the Cox people were able to speak to this because I don't work for a network, but I would think that they would have an awful lot to say about this. And I would think that if we had people from Comcast or we had people from Google, if we had people at an end where they were tracking IP addresses and had either access to people getting onto the internet or people that use the internet, so that covers both of those people, that they've been doing that measurement for a long time already. and if we're going to be a massive effort for television in general, but why wouldn't that group apply metrics as they already have and be able to provide metrics on an audience basis? You can already look at DoubleClick and apply ComScore or Nielsen to your measurement now. It's a matter of adjusting to a new audience grouping as far as people watching television. But if the premise is that it's all measurable, then it's certainly a huge undertaking for those companies to take on. But why wouldn't they just continue their expertise with this, new universe? And having worked at ComScore in the past and work in television now, like I'm very interested in all of the ideas that are going to be put forth, and what ComScore is going to be doing with the rent track information and how they can move it forward as well.
So Leslie, how well do you know the rent track stuff? I'm curious what you think might need to change or evolve in that service in order to be able to measure individual consumption as opposed to household or delivery to the household. Is there anything that needs to change?
Right now, everyone that has access to set-top box data is working.
Did the audio go out?
Yeah, hold on.
And
So Leslie, are you still there? Denise, is that you on the line?
I'm on. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Chris, Howard, I joined the call just so I can answer any questions that you guys might have and maybe help guide the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Howard. We're still working through some of the technology, but I think the conversation has led so far to using technology such as Rentrack's set-top box tools embedded into the household itself and the devices would allow us to be able to measure the actual person consuming the content as opposed to how it's being delivered to the household. So the thought so far is that the technology is existing today. It needs to continue to evolve. One of the challenges though is, would the metrics change for any reason? Is there any reason to believe that the need for reach, frequency, time that the content's being consumed would change in any way in the future?
Well, and I think, and Leslie, I think, was onto the right idea about, so from a digital ad sales transaction, right now, the role of Comscore and Nielsen are, basically, to estimate, to provide data so that we could develop demo estimates if someone wants a demo guarantee, and then, use VCE or use OCR to post-analyze the schedule. So I guess part of the question is, in a world where linear TV is digitized, is that really the role of companies like Nielsen or Comscore? Or I think, Leslie, to your point, do you think we'd also need to rely on those companies to actually count ad impressions served, because for some reason we won't be able to do that ourselves?
And I would add to that, what would the MRC's role be? And getting back to objectivity in the measurement data, audience estimates.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, do you think? I mean, when we talk about objectivity, is there any need to change our perspective? I mean, it would seem to me that the need for objectivity remains just as strong, particularly if the concern is you've got potentially ads that are being served to smart TVs, which may not even be on.
And that's part of the technology issue, because it is possible to know with newer technology when the TV's on or off.
So then how do we ensure that it isn't there isn't a robot or something on the other end, which is think about it, if you've got a connected household and someone has tapped into your Wi-Fi and has told your Nest to turn on the TV in order to be able to consume all those ads when no one's home and you're at work.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, that is really a good point. That how does it, being that most people leave their set-top box on, you're going to have a different, you now are going to have a different level of fraud, which is, ads served to a TV set that's actually off, but the cable box thinks is on.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So does it mean that does part of the technology need to come from the Vizios and the, Panasonics and the Samsungs themselves?
Yeah, Chris, I think you're right. ACR becomes a big part of whatever solution there is.
So just to let everybody know, an update on technology, if you're there, our IT is working to globally unmute everybody on the master end from our offices. So in the meantime, if you've got thoughts about how your smart TV ought to work in the future, please type them in the chat box. Excuse me. So here's a thought then. What happens in 3 years when you've got your TV technology and you've got the manufacturers saying being blamed, and you've got the media networks are now suing all of the TV manufacturers because they're being charged for fraud that's going through the TVs and the set-top boxes that the TV networks, the media, have no control over. And Nielsen is no longer in business, and ComScore and the Rentrack technologies have been eclipsed because they've been subsumed by Samsung. Good point, Elise. Measuring in groups. So that's interesting. So what do we think? I mean, is there technology out there today which allows the TV to actually talk back and see who's in the room?
Not at scale. I mean, there's a research company that's testing something in Boston that puts cameras on TVs and watches who's in the room, but nothing at scale.
Go ahead, Denise. We saw you pop up, but couldn't hear you.
No, it wasn't me.
No?
No.
I mean, think about it right now. You know, I think probably most of us on on whether it's our PC or mobile, we've got a little camera there. So imagine if that camera was now embedded into your smart TV. Is that a good thing, or does that scare you? Does that sound a little too Big Brother 1984?
Pretty icky.
Yeah.
I'll second that one.
But that could be, maybe that might be the solution in order to ensure that there's actually a live person on the other end. I mean, if that was, yeah, Roger, good point. So it's a good question, Cindy. I mean, so what's the trade-off between privacy and accuracy?
So hey, Chris, just process steps. So would it make sense that the report out is like the top 5 things we really need? You know, I think it's clear that it's hard to get to a solution. Should you just report out like the 5 or 6 things that the group is generally worried about in terms of, or some of the stumbling blocks that we need to think about ahead of time, like the issue of, the set-top box can count an ad being served to a TV that's actually off. Would it make sense to just let that be your guys' report out?
I think that makes sense. What do others think? Do you have a thought or a burning issue you want to make sure that we share with the rest of the group?
I'm interested in hearing others' perspective on the importance of individual persons versus households. Persons certainly being the driver on digital, and Nielsen is always focused on people data. It sounds like we're moving to a cross-platform environment in this discussion where it's all about the individual. Is there general agreement along those lines among those in this group?
Thoughts, folks? Type your response in the chat box.
I don't see the chat.
I mean, Denise, it's interesting because if we think about this scenario, part of it is saying that everything is moved to the individual now. All media is being delivered and consumed more by the individual as opposed to a household.
Yeah.
But maybe that becomes part of what we rely on research companies to do, which is, imagine a world where there's a cookie, there's a smart TV cookie, and, obviously technology will dictate something different, but there's some sort of tracking, but then we need Nielsen or ComScore to be able to do a really good job of trying to estimate who's actually in front of the set at an individual level when that cookie is served. And for everybody on the phone, that the estimate of who's in front of the set could be different, will be different, for every show.
It's even possible that it'd differ or vary within or during a show as well as across shows. So I think let's do that. I mean, we're going to come back as a full group in about 5 minutes. So let's try to summarize the conversation, the chat, and see, okay, well, where does this lead us? I mean, it sounds like part of what we're saying is that the measurement challenge needs to move from households to individuals, but with no loss but we have to retain the objectivity in measurement that we have today, and that there's still a critical role for that third party, that standard to be able to ensure that the measurement is accurate. However, the technology and the use of things like cookies and delivery through set-top box or the TV itself are still need to evolve to be able to identify who exactly is in that room watching, who is actually consuming the TV content, without going so far as to say, I'm going to put a camera on the device itself, like an Xbox One, because that impinges on the consumer's privacy. So what we still are going to need to have some technology solutions that allow us to be able to estimate or more accurately track the individual who's consuming the content and not just the total household. And then the risk in all of this is that as people's houses become more connected, as you've got your Nest and Alexa and Siri monitoring every piece of electronics in your home, the risk is going to be that the TV is actually off, but the devices are able to be manipulated so that there's fraud that's taking place because somebody is able to tap into that network and say that I've consumed the ad when really the TV is off and there's nobody home. Is that I've kind of a long summary, but did I capture the thoughts appropriately?
I think so. Although Leslie's comment really was, do we really need that? Is there really a place for the third-party measurers rather than everybody who is involved and has data providing metrics that are trustworthy? It'd be interesting during the few minutes to explore some of that. Many data sources from all sorts of providers and how that may play out.
Right, that's a great point, because you wonder, does Nielsen or ComScore need to buy out Experian or Axiom or Epsilon or someone who's got data on every home in America to be able to do this properly?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Or is it or does it then fall back onto the content providers, the Turners of the world, to synthesize those different data providers, like I presume, Howard, you guys have already been having to do now?
Yeah, Chris, we actually talk about being data agnostic, that, when we're doing any of our targeted ad deals for TV, we're actually using whatever data sets the agency or the advertiser asks us to use.
Yeah.
I think that's probably more the role. But look, another part of this conversation, I think, is going to be in 3 years, does anybody care about age, sex, demographics? Or is everything being transacted based on some advertiser audience definition?
Yeah, I think that's my sense is that's part of what we're grappling with. If advertisers are saying I can get that level of individual granularity from digital, why can't I be getting it from all other media, particularly for television, where I'm spending so much of my budget?
Yep.
So Howard, let me ask you, how are I'm looking at David and the conversation going on in the room. What's our plan? Are we do we want to come back as a full group?
Yeah, I think we're going to do that now. And I think sort of, look, if someone could capture the couple of things that you guys have talked about that are sort of big, thorny watch-outs that we need to be careful about and think ahead of time, I think that'd be a sort of useful contribution to the session.
Yep.
I'm going to head back in the room now.
Okay, thank you, Howard. Hi, LL. We've got somebody else who's joining us on the audio. Can you identify yourself? Okay, so can folks still hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, Denise, thanks. Good. Okay, so Denise, how about if we tag team this this conversation back to the rest of the group?
How about if you do it?
Okay, there.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And I agree that timeliness of data delivery is critically important.
Yep.
Yeah, we did. We basically thought about like 20 things we had thought about that are just thorny things left to deal with.
You guys want to go first?
Sure.
Okay. Phone group.
Yes, Professor Cole.
You love it.
I think it's kind of neat, actually. I never really thought about becoming a professor, but
You wear it well.
I just have this one problem with that, which is that I have to go back to school again, and that's not happening.
You just need to find someone to give you like honorary.
Well, you know what I got to do? I could buy a degree because there's bots, you know, and right.
There are ways around.
Yeah, it's a good point. All right. Phone group. We're gonna start with you guys, and Chris, I'll leave it to you whether you want to do your summary or you want to ask somebody on the team. Because I'm gonna ask somebody on the team. So, because the movement of programmatic enables the digitization of video content, you have brands that are aggressively bringing today's traditional planning and buying functions in-house. They're using all the tools that are currently being used by others, and in fact, some of those tools are disappearing entirely and have to change. So it's 3 years from now. There's been major disruption in the industry. I'd love to hear from the phone group about what does that disruption look like? Why? Who are the winners and the losers? What comes out of this that's dramatically changed from the way that media planning, buying, and measurement happen today? And what I'd like to do is talk to us. Let's talk about it a little bit. And then certainly Howard and I will comment on it, but what I really want to happen is also folks here in the room, I'd love you to ask the questions and you to make the challenges rather than just Professor Schimmel. Go ahead, team.
Okay, Professor Cole. Tell you what, we're having some audio challenges on the Blue Jeans end, so I'm going to speak for the group, but we're also going to have comments that Evelyn Rodriguez in the room there will be monitoring on the chat box. I think the discussion from the group is the discussion from the group was this. I mean, clearly that the technology is leading us to get rid of basically the age, sex, gender, the age and gender demo. That because it's now possible to measure at the individual level who is actually consuming the content and not just what's being delivered into the home.
Okay.
And I think one of the challenges is this, that the need then to integrate third-party data with the existing measurement tools and to do so on a real-time basis still exists. I mean, so that challenge and that need doesn't go away, but the potential then is for the technology of the set-top box tracking then to get embedded into the smart TV and the technology itself. So that in that scenario, you've got the winners could be someone like Vizio or Samsung, the folks who are actually manufacturing the device that's projecting the content. And the losers are the traditional measurement companies, the Nielsen's and the ComScores of the world, because they're being foreshadowed. They're no longer in every home, or you now have the projection device is now your measurement device as well. So why do you need a separate measurement device?
So Chris, does that mean that Google with Chrome and Mozilla with Firefox and Apple with Safari are also measurement devices?
I mean, Roku's in that business today.
Right?
Roku knows more Roku understands every bit of consumption on their platform.
So we have an ecosystem of measurement. I'll throw a little curveball. What happens, let's go to the Google example. What happens when Google is the largest ad server, but they're also the measurement company behind Chrome? Is that okay?
No, that's where you raise, I mean, and that was one of the points we said is in order for people to transact with trust, you have to maintain objectivity in the ecosystem. And so that puts more weight on the folks like the MRC and being able to uphold and maintain and audit standards and have some meaningful penalties for people who break the rules. It becomes a tricky game. But then, the other big brother issue we talked about was, well, how do you know? Let's say the measurement technology is now embedded in the projection device. What happens in your connected home if somebody taps into your Wi-Fi, taps into your Nest and your Alexa, and you're not home, the TV's off, but they're able to tell the set-top box or the cable the TV company that somebody's there watching the TV and consuming the ads when there's nobody there.
You suggest bots?
Well, you have a different version of fraud, which is, the set-top box thinks someone's there and is counting the ad and the TV is off. And how you deal with that is a big thorny issue. I mean, just come back to something, though, that I think is important as we think about this, which is in today's world with TV, there are some areas where there's addressable advertising that's available. So you can do addressable advertising through Cablevision. You can do addressable advertising from Dish and DirecTV. I think there's probably about 45 billion homes that are addressable to some extent. Problem is they're all different platforms, right? And so an agency can't scale easily. They have to have different plumbing and stuff like that. And one of the things, Chris, we didn't talk about is, does there need to be this massive DMP that's across everything and is, to your point, is platform agnostic, right?
Well, and on the measurement side, we need comparability also.
Yeah.
Okay, so though you had said a little while ago that your team felt that the winners are the distribution platform companies that now have all that data, and some of the losers might be the traditional measurement companies. Kara's already got a resume working. Get out of Neil.
There's a few others.
I'm sure. We're hiring.
I was gonna say, who has a job for me?
But wait, but just as you said that, we just also said that maybe we need the DMP in the sky or the Uber arbiter. And so does that, instead of eliminating or reducing the value of a trusted Uber measurement entity, does it simply require existing independents to morph in their businesses?
Yeah.
Is that really what happens?
It definitely could. I mean, that's one scenario to be sure. Another scenario is that the measurement companies are bought by the device companies and they become, independent subsidiaries of, and therefore, again, that runs the risk that you still have the fox guarding the hen house, but you still maintain that third party measurement. It's a thorny one, and I don't think we didn't come to a solution on that one.
But the other thing we talked about is thinking about the importance in that world of companies like Axiom and Epsilon, who know something about every home in America, where like now Nielsen knows a lot about 50,000 homes, but they know nothing about the remainder of the United States, and sort of the importance of those companies in that DMP in the sky.
Yep, that's a good point. Excellent point.
That's why I'm a professor.
Yes, thank you for
That's why he's the expert. And yes, I mean, I think you see the chat. I mean, we believe there's a need for that third party objectivity, no question. It's the question remains, is it going to continue to exist where there are independent or smaller individual people providing one slice of the pie, or is somebody going to say, no, I'm going to do all of it, and I'm going to integrate all of the Nielsen and the Rentrack and the Axiom and bring it all together into a true single source in that respect?
I'd buy that as a possible future. That has a lot of viability.
Well, and also one of the things we talked about is one of the questions, and Gail, you may have perspective of this from your history, is at that point, does measuring age, sex of who's consuming the content matter? So if you have Axiom and Experian and you have all audience data that's driving this whole business, not age, sex demographics, if you have the ability to transact based on audience, is there the need for a research company that knows when Jasmine is watching E, it's someone 18 to 24? But I mean, the question is...
I think not until this generation of the C-suite has retired, because they transpose everything down into demographics, because that's what they grew up measuring. And if you look at what's going on at Procter & Gamble right now, first they said they wanted to measure target precision. Then they said, okay, no, we think we're being too precise, right? It came out in the public and said, oh, being too precise. Now they're talking about precision at scale. But anytime you talk about precision, they can go through and profile, for example, the lovely Jasmine. as ARF friends and family. But then they want to generalize, at scale means generalize, and there's still, I haven't seen anybody generalize that doesn't somehow include demographics.
And the procurement.
They'll start with like a millennial, right? I mean, I don't know if you are, but so I think that's going to be super hard. And that was certainly my experience was the way to make sense of it all. You know, we did values-based segmentation. The way to make sense of it all, we had to transpose it back to market share and demographics in order to get senior management to buy it. And they bought it, and then you could do values-based back at the range with next to market share.
So here's what I think I heard. Yeah, I think I heard that the first thing that's happening is the companies that are in the distribution device space have taken on the primary role of measurement that can be used not just for verification, but also for planning and buying. They have the keys to the castle. Our big challenge is that because we now have a disparate device ecosystem, there need to be an arbiter. And one possibility is the audit technique, right, where we're monitoring the disparate group. Another idea was that there become the DMP in the sky, or that sort of ultimate roll-up. And I don't think we know the answer to, but those are both really interesting and viable options. And in this case, if scenario one, you said the winners are the device companies, the losers are the existing measurement companies. And what's interesting about your scenario is that in scenario number 2B, the one with the DMP in the sky, it is entirely possible that the young bucks who are going to take over the older folks at Nielsen and Comscore that can't yet see past, as Gail said, past age and gender demographics, actually recognize that there's an opportunity to be that new business and to leverage their brand names as the arbiter of the roll-up. I think that's really interesting. All right, great job. Thank you, group number.
Thank you, everybody.
And Chris, thank you for your leadership there.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was going to ask somebody from our team, and there was a person here who thought she was going to be on the hook, but I'm going to switch gears and give it to Kara Nielsen. So our challenge here is that the problems of bots and ad blocking have become ubiquitous, and they're not just ubiquitous in digital dimes, they're ubiquitous on all media dollars. It's almost a $50 billion a year problem. About a third of the media ecosystem is being hurt by bots, which are literally stealing money, and by ad blocking, where you have consumers who are not seeing the very currency that is funding all the great content. So that's the challenge. What I'd like to ask Kara to do is explain to us what we think has to happen, who are the winners and losers, and why. Why do we think this is the right answer? I'll give it to you. Can you speak up, though, and let's make sure you have a mic.
There's one right here. Okay. So we talked about we were all the people here. This is not who I look at, I guess. I'll go to Gail. She wasn't part of our discussion. We talked about the whole ecosystem in terms of going from the advertiser to the agency to the ad tech companies that make everything happen to the publisher, and where for both the ad bot and ad blocking conversation, who gets affected by the most of it, the most by it, and we kind of landed on it's the two on the end. It's the advertiser and the publisher that have the most to lose with it, because everything that happens in the middle is still going to happen. The technology is still going to serve. The agency still has done their job in the short term. There might be a long-term customer satisfaction issue, but it's really the value of the inventory going down for the publisher and the advertiser's dollars not being put in front of people that it needs to be put in front of. And so we actually kind of talked to some of the people in the group who have ad blockers and why it is that they do that. And, there's just kind of annoyance with these ads following them around the internet when you're searching for a flight somewhere, and then you get ads about that particular city. And so, thinking about the consumer experience too, and the idea of native and ads that are better contextualized and more personal, but better quality came up. And I think kind of very high level, what we took away is, as an industry, and this is something that is only going to work with the entire ecosystem. I think, as David said, jumps into the pool together. Everyone kind of needs to agree with this. Is we need to move from quantity to quality. So we've created all of this inventory for people that do not care about it, like just ads being flashed all over digital devices that people don't care. So if we actually create some scarcity and take away this inventory, but then up the quality of it, there's maybe less space for ads, but the cost for each of them needs to be higher because the quality is going to be higher, but then the reception is going to be higher by the consumer. So we kind of see like an industry-wide agreement to create the scarcity and create more quality in the addressability and the context of the ads, helping the publisher increase the value of their inventory, the advertiser have ads that are effective and resonate with customers, and then the consumer not being so annoyed by these irrelevant, annoying ads following them around all the time.
I'll throw one thing out at Howard. I gave you guys a Turner shout out for this. We did talk about how for this group, when they thought about the advertising experience, nobody can remember any ads. It's just to completely ignore it. So even if you're not actually blocking them, you don't see them. And we were talking about how you guys, Turner, were lowering the ad load in order to improve the experience and the memorability. But that you can only go so far, because at some point, if your prices were to also inch up to compensate you for that exchange of fewer, right? At some point, the media buyer is going to say, this Turner ads are too expensive, I'm just going over to NBC. But this notion of sort of like our our ad crisis summit recommendation is, as an industry, it's almost like January 1st, 2019, we're going to cut the ad load 90%. And we agree together, it's not antitrust, it's not anti-competitive, it's just survival, that we're going to completely reboot the advertising experience as a media ecosystem, because the only way it will work is if everybody, and we did use this term, jumps in the pool together. So why does the consumer suddenly say, oh, I'll turn off my ad blocker?
Because the quality of what they're being shown is relevant and it's better, and it's not, I don't know. Does anybody who has the ad blockers want to say anything about it?
Well, I think it's a signal to noise problem. So really, if you cut out a lot of the noise and you have experiences that validate that, then I think I know for myself personally, I take notice of those experiences that are good, and that reinforces me to go back to that.
And just one thing I think we're starting to realize, and hopefully other publishers and other programmers will get there, is that a better ad experience actually means more engaged people with our content.
Exactly.
So we not only, obviously if you run a 5-minute break, right when you've gotten someone really engaged with your show, it takes a long time to get back to that level of engagement. And I think we realize that if we could be better about the ad experience and make ads work on our behalf. We did something with, we're starting to do native on TV, where we'll let an advertiser own a 2-minute block. And there's a feminine products company, 7th generation, and they ran a 2-minute native spot in Samantha Bee on TBS, and we did Realize engagement, and we actually saw that engagement in the show was higher after the people had watched the native spot.
And that native spot, it's native plus it's the product he's referring to. The native spot fit perfectly with the family. It was narrated by Maya Rudolph. It was like it fit the content that I'm building.
We came up with this also because I asked the question of the group, how many of you skip ads on television, even though we all have technology, or most of us have a technology that would enable us to do so. And most people said, I kind of watch the ads on TV because they're pretty good. They're not annoying. And some of them are actually really clever. So I think our group concluded from an ad blocking point of view, I'm recapping to make sure I've got it. If we all jumped in the pool together, two things happen for the organizations, the B2B organizations that are most affected by today's ad blocking, which is that while the brand pays more per unit, what they're actually paying for is a consumer that is really paying attention, as opposed to paying today for 50% bots and for a lot of consumers that aren't paying attention. And for the publisher, well, it's obvious there, we're getting paid more per unit, but as Howard just said, not only are we getting paid more per unit, but we're keeping our consumers engaged in our content, which means we ultimately get more units in front of them, which means we all do better. And then going back to the consumer, why are they comfortable with it? It's that value exchange. I get some great content. I do have this choice, right? I theoretically could pay for it, or I could have somebody else pay for it. But in this case, I'm letting somebody else pay for it. And it's not so bad. So now, how did that flip to bots? This is a little tougher, but I think we concluded that. You want to go? Or you want me to?
I don't remember how.
Okay, yeah, because we covered this in the last 15 seconds. I think what we said here is that one of the reasons that the bot ecosystem has thrived, actually there's two things going on. One is that we've created an industry sector on the publisher side that believes it's okay when you can't deliver an advertisement to enough of your audience, because there aren't that many audience members, just go buy more traffic, right? Because we want to deliver more ads. Well, if we all jump in the pool together and agree we're just going to eliminate, completely stop. There's zero buying of traffic. Buying traffic is buying bots. Let's just call spade a spade. And so that practice starts. That's the first crack in the ad fraud ecosystem, is that we're simply no longer funding the purchase of non-human traffic. And the second is because the ads themselves are many, many fewer. And we as an ecosystem can measure the behaviors of consumers who are supposedly more engaged with great premium content. The opportunity for bots to exist and make money on these fake publishers, which is a horrible consumer experience, no consumer would go there, means that the advertiser there's fewer pieces of the ecosystem, fewer places the ads go because there's a flight towards quality. The likelihood of an ad being bought on one of those sites is much lower. And the ability to detect those, because there's such a huge difference between the ad load and the frequency on a bot-infected publisher versus a real publisher, that disparity also makes it easier for us to detect and eliminate. So I found something very interesting about both of these, is that neither one of the groups jumped into a tech solution. We all jumped into a resetting of the way the business operates. I think is really interesting. So, I'd like to applaud both groups. I think we did a really nice job. And before we break, because it is close to 10 o'clock, yep, 2 minutes till. I just want to ask each group, was there anyone on the phone who had questions for in the room group? Take a pause for there and take it if there's any questions. And we have the little, we have your messages on screen, so if you can't speak, you can ask them by text message.
Virtual applause.
Yeah.
Yes, and Chris, thank you for the applause.
Virtual applause.
Okay, and are there any questions from the room group for the folks on the phone? Okay. Dr. Schimmel.
Nice job.
Pleasure.
Great idea.
Folks, thank you very much.
David, that was great.
Yeah. Thank you to you guys too. And Jasmine. Thank you, everyone on the line.
Thank you.
Mark?
Nice to meet you.
I'm Dan.
Thank you.
What part of the answer?
Herbal analytics for adults. Actually,